Alright friends, today we are discussing one of my favorite weapons in the game and a very solid weapon on the veteran, which is the Katachan Combat Blade. Now I've discussed this weapon before, but I wanted to talk about some stuff that has made it pretty special on the veteran class. That really helps it to stand out as one of the best sidearms you can be bringing if you are playing the veteran, and I want to help you get accustomed to it because it's a really solid weapon, but you can't rely on stagger or anything. It's all about the damage here. It's all about the damage and movement. So if you are interested in learning how to play fast and play aggressive and evasive with this weapon, well then stay tuned and let's get into everything there is to know about the lovely knife. So let's start with the absolute basics for this weapon. It has two different marks. You can choose the Mark 6 or the Mark 3. Let me quickly demonstrate the differences here. They have very similar damage profiles. However, the Mark 6 opens with this heavy attack that does a big sweep. If I could actually hit two enemies, there we go. So you can see I can hit multiple enemies at the same time. This can be great for horde clearing. It has a pretty good amount of cleave. So all these flak enemies gonna get cut up. You can go for multiple headshots in a line, whatever you want to do. And of course it has follow-up, stab, those sort of attacks. Just like you'd see on the Mark III. It also has this lightning quick push stab that comes out in like a millisecond and it's pinpoint precise. That attack, I believe, has a boosted critical chance as well. I think it has like a 10% boosted critical chance. Or I want to say it does anyway. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, that attack is super deadly, and it does as much damage as a heavy strike down like we'll see on the other Mark. And this weapon also has like little flailing light attacks that don't have any direct pokey pokies, which means you can use it to clear hordes better. So this is your more horde clear preferential one. The other one is more for assassins, right? For the Combat Blade Mark III, it starts with this heavy strike down. So this heavy strike down has very similar damage profile to the push stab in the last attack, and then you would go into just more strike downs, so at different angles here. So you don't get any heavy sweeping attacks here. You do have some sweeping attacks on your light ones, but then light 3 is a single target poke, so you don't really have a great selection of horde clearing potential here, although we do have a good bleeds to apply that. And here is our push stab. It's a overhead single target kind of strike down that'll just cut straight down to the target. So I tend to prefer the Mark 6 because I think it's more versatile. You have both single target and more multi-target put into there, but it's completely up to your preference. 95% of everything else about this weapon is going to be exactly the same. Now I'm going to put it back to the right mark and we'll go on and talk about the stats up here. So the stats on this weapon. How do we want to build this thing? Well, we want to first start by making certain that our minimum stat is mobility. Mobility is cool and all, but everything else here is damage. So we want damage, right? The weapon's all about damage. For the perks, Unyielding and Carapace are going to be your best bets here because this weapon has low base damage. It's not very likely we're going to overkill many targets, and when you do hit a crit, right, it'll only really round up and kill like smaller targets. And for, as you could see just a second ago, for like targets like flak armored guys like these, we don't need 25% extra damage, right? That's not going to help us here. These guys are just going to straight die no matter what. We really like that damage though against crushers and against bosses, monstrosities, because this weapon's bleeds are devastating against these, especially once we take into consideration that extra 25% and the blessings we're about to talk about. So I would highly recommend those two because those guys are big health targets that our bleeds are going to do lots of work against. Now let's talk blessings here. So blessings, we can't really get around blessings on this weapon without first of all talking about the blessing, Uncanny Strike, which many of you have heard me explain over the years. I actually might make a separate video just to explain Uncanny Strike, but basically Uncanny Strike adds damage efficacy to the baseline of the weapon. And how you figure out the weapon's baseline damage efficacy is by checking out the weapon's stats. So just really simply here, I'll go into the inspect and see this number right here, these numbers, these are the baseline stats. This is 100% efficacy. So when I open this page here and I see my heavy attack, right? If it says 152, like it does on Unyielding and Maniac, I have 100% damage efficacy versus those types of enemies. For flak armored and infested, it looks like I have like 90% or so. And then down here is Carapace at 60%. So when you get a stack of Uncanny Strike, it adds 24% to that efficacy. So what we do is after one stack, one headshot hit, our damage efficacy on the next hit is going to be 84%. And then after another hit, it actually will go over the cap. It'll go over 100%. And after you go to 100%, it actually continues to improve your damage against that target, but at 1/4 of the rate, at a greatly reduced rate. So you still get a increase to damage, but you're going to get a huge increase from going from 60% effective damage to 100% effective. It's almost doubling your damage, right? Just with 2 stacks of this, and then you can boost it further beyond. And the same thing, because this can apply over 120% rending, even at 1/4 of the rate, that's still a lot of damage. That's like 30% damage against bosses and stuff. So it scales up against these targets, and certain types of targets take more from having more rending. So to demonstrate that here, right? Just to demonstrate, when we look at the bleeds, this is the reason why we want this, is because the other talent we're going to be using, the other blessing we're going to be using is Lacerate here. And Lacerate applies bleeds. And bleeds are not very effective against Carapace. They really suck against Crushers, as you can see here. 85 damage, right? Even with 16 stacks on there. However, when we start to apply Uncanny Strike, we're doing 361 damage per tick. And that is a lot of damage, right? Compared to that's 4 times the damage we were doing just a second ago. And the same thing, even though we had 100% damage efficacy against the bosses here, you can see if I've got those stacks on the feet there, we're all good at, what was it? 230. But if I keep hitting the head, if I get my Uncanny Strikes up here, now I'm sitting at 364. Now, granted, I do have a talent that's procced with a crit, but I'm sitting at 299, 283 or something like that. Yeah, really high numbers. So yeah, we definitely want to make certain that we are getting those Uncanny Strike stacks in order to boost the damage against larger targets that won't die in just like 1 or 2 hits, right? For everything else though, there's Mastercard, and of course there's just body shotting, and that is why the second blessing I recommend here is Lacerate. Now there's tons of blessings on these weapons. They're spoiled for blessings, but we don't really care about precognition. We don't really care about critical chance, right? The direct damage of the knife for the veteran isn't what it's all about. It is about applying bleed stacks. Bleed stacks are super freaking deadly on the veteran, as we'll show in the talent tree in a second. And so the best talent for this, or the best blessing for this, is Lacerate. Now, I've seen people comment before, why aren't you using Flesh Tear? It applies twice the bleed stacks. However, it requires a critical hit, and that is a big ask sometimes. What if you don't hit a crit? Well, then this blessing effectively does nothing, right? But Lacerate guarantees 4 bleed stacks on every non-weak spot hit. And you might be thinking, well, Uncanny Strike procs on weak spot hit, and this procs on non-weak spot hit, so they're kind of at odds with each other. However, when you're going in on most enemies, just hitting them like 2 or 3 times with the knife is enough to straight kill them. Like, that's complete overkill on that guy, right? I think just 2 attacks would be enough to, yeah, 2 is all you need. 12 stacks of bleed is so much damage to these little guys. So we don't really care about headshotting them. When it comes to Crushers and stuff, we can do that, and then we can go in for some headshots, right? Maybe just getting like 1 or 2, and you might miss and hit a body shot, and anytime you're gonna hit them, it's gonna put 4 bleed stacks on them, and then we can add in Uncanny Strikes. And as I showed you on the table before, after only 2 headshot hits, you're at over 100% bleed efficacy. You are doing more than you would deal true damage. So we don't have to worry about hitting that many headshots in order to get full bleed efficacy, but we do want to make certain our bleeds are going to 16 immediately, because it is super effective for clearing pretty much everything else in the game, and that is what this weapon is super strong at. So there's my recommendations for the setup there. This is just the best possible way to set it up for the veteran and for many classes. Let's go on to the talents and talk about how I would set up a build that makes the best use of what the knife can do. And this might not necessarily be it, but I've got a lot of those talents in here, and I'll talk about them as we get out. So of course, at the top of the tree, confirm kill and out for blood. Because we're killing a lot with damage over time effects, the confirm kill and out for blood here, they don't have requirements to say, oh, you must kill with direct headshot or something like Exhilarating Takedown does. So these are going to give you a toughness back for all those bleeding specialists and bleeding elites that exsanguinate. Same thing with out for blood here. There's nothing else up here that's really important, so we'll move on down. We also have Superiority Complex. Now, I talked about this in my Recon Lasgun video if you didn't see it, but for damage over time effects, the Veteran is king. He is so good at them. And the reason being is because he has a ton of talents that boost the general damage. Base damage and just flat the word damage is what we want to see. We don't want to see the word melee damage. We want to see just the word damage. And so this is base damage, which means it's going to multiply not only the direct damage of the knife, but the bleeds that follow on. Now you can take 10% attack speed here if you wish. Personally, I find that the knife, being a very, very fast attacking weapon already, 10% faster attack speed isn't really all that tangible. It doesn't add up to a whole lot in my experience, but you are welcome to take it. However, what's right below it is disgusting. Serrated Blade, the strongest bleed talent in the game, maybe, except for maybe Scourge or something. 2 stacks of bleed to the target on melee hit, and this is where this knife comes together, right? So we've got 4 stacks of bleed on non-weak spot hits and 2 stacks of bleed on any hit. So now we go from having to hit a target 4 times to get them to that bleed cap of 16 to having to hit them 3 times. And after just 2 hits, they're at 12 stacks, right? And that means at 12 stacks on a like a carapace target like this, we can start to go for the head. And after just 2 hits, we're now at 16 stacks, max stacks, and we've got uncanny strikes in there. So yeah, it starts to add up very, very quickly when you can apply 6 stacks of bleed with a single light attack. I mean, just to demonstrate, like a 6 stacks of bleed. I mean, that guy just died straight up, but like 6 stacks of bleed is enough to kill a small target, right? So that's all you gotta do. Just tap them. Just give them a little love tap, walk away, and they'll all just exsanguinate. So yeah, bleeds are disgusting. Adding 2 more stacks is great. And the best part about this is it makes up for the fact that a lot of times when you're going to apply that uncanny strike stacks on those headshots, because you're not getting a bleed refresh on the body shot, it'll fall off because bleeds fall off very quickly. That's one of the things about the damage type is you'll see it decays incredibly quickly here. But since you always get bleed stacks in every hit, you can hit them in the head and you'll get 2 more stacks back. You'll refresh your stacks, which is goated. Now this is, I'm about to make a guide on like how to level as the Veteran, and this combination right here will carry you through every difficulty in the game, because just walking up to enemies and melee attacking them with a knife, putting 16 bleed stacks on them in like a quarter of a second is disgusting. Okay, let's move on down past this. Now, it doesn't really matter what aura you choose. You could choose Catch a Breath, or not Catch a Breath. You could choose Fire Team here for an extra 7.5% damage to your bleeds, but whatever. Now, when we get down here, Infiltrate, again, is a very, very powerful talent with the knife. And it's kind of fun, because Infiltrate has kind of a aesthetic fit for the knife, doesn't it? Of course, voice command, always really, really good. Crowd controlling enemies, get a bunch of bleeds on them, or shove them down to the ground and then stab them all while they're on the ground a little bit so they bleed out before they can stand up. But Infiltrate here has this special 30% damage boost to it. So when you activate this, this happens for 8 seconds after stealth ends and during stealth. So what we can do is we can actually get bleeds on an enemy like this and get them all stacked up and then watch the damage here. Okay, so we're at 397 and we'll stealth 475, right? So we just immediately jump to this massive number and his stacks go way up, and we can just keep those bleed stacks at super, super high values and get extra value out of them, and it lasts for 8 seconds after the stealth ends too, so we can maximize our bleed damage through using Infiltrate. Now we gotta go down here, we gotta get Reciprocity. The knife, as you probably noticed earlier when we were looking at the stats here, has absolutely massive ratios on criticals and critical weak spots. You know, of course we like bleeds and all, but who doesn't like just outright killing something because our heavy attack hits a critical and does 900 damage when it's supposed to do 152? So that's, what is that? 6x multiplier on a heavy attack here, and the push stab doing a similar damage. So yeah, that's really how you'll want to do damage on a boss, is just repeatedly spamming this attack, because as you can see there, I mean, this is absurd levels of damage. Let's actually stealth and just do it. Yeah, we're just casually face stabbing this guy for 5,000 damage. Yeah, pretty good, I'd say. So that is the power of the knife here, is hitting those headshots, hitting those criticals, and that is why reciprocity is so good here, stacking 25% additional crit chance. That goes excellently with Desperado here, which further increases our crit chance and further increases our finesse bonus, which is going to make that direct damage all the more deadly. And then Skirmisher, because it's all base damage. If you're sprinting around and getting melee attacks with this, is going to be augmenting all bleed damage, all direct damage by 25%, which is disgusting. And then behind that is Exploit Weakness, which has even further synergy. So we've got crits for the melee, which is going to increase the direct damage. We've got base damage increases, which is going to increase the direct damage and the bleed. And then this is going to, if you crit, increase all damage, all direct damage, all bleed. Massive, massive synergistic chain right here for the knife. Now over here on the left side, you might think that these would have some value, but they really don't. Agile engagement, those melee kills, or their requirement to get that melee damage, this melee damage that you're going to get out of getting range kills doesn't apply to the bleeds. And getting a quote-unquote melee kill is also not triggered by a bleed kill. It has to be the direct damage. So this is actually anti-synergistic. And Onslaught is just not that necessary anymore and requires too many additional points, I think, to get. And also hitting 16 times with the knife is probably not in the cards. As far as Weapon Specialist, this can be a pretty decent little fit with the knife. However, the problem being here is, again, it requires you to get melee kills in order to trigger Weapon Specialist, and bleed kills don't count as melee kills. Having additional dodge speed and dodge distance with this weapon is good and all if you were getting range kills with it, but I think that Weapon Specialist is better used with single shot, high power weapons that will just like boom, instantly get a kill and get you some value. Now let's go to the middle tree, where of course we have to like come down here and talk about Bring It Down. Bring It Down, obvious fit for the knife because Ogryns and Monstrosities, these are big health targets, and these are things that the knife really likes. It does not care about this rending because we've already got rending, and also 10% is too little for a talent. It doesn't really care about anything else here, but focus target. Oh my god. If you are using the knife and you're trying to maximize your knife value, focus target as a keystone is what you want, because this is going to not only make the target you are tagging take 30% additional from your direct damage plus your bleeds, but it's also going to boost you and your whole team's damage by 15% if you can continually kill targets. So that's going to, again, increase your direct damage and your bleeds by 15%, and it just acts as a massive, massive multiplier for everything on down the chain. And as one final talent that is really, really valuable here, Precision Strikes. Precision Strike just increasing weak spot damage by 30%, as we already assessed. Very potent already at getting weak spot kills, isn't it? But adding 30% more to that means that our critical strikes, when we're fully stacked on like a boss, even without focus target and infiltrate and all that stuff, go from doing like 2300 damage to like 2700 damage, which is a big, big leap. So yeah, just make certain every percentage multiplier, like headshot multiplier and stuff like that, that is super valuable. And it's going to work on not only melee but range as well, so it's just generally good to have in most veteran builds want to take something like that. Before I dismiss you, I have to show you the tricks of the trade with the knife, something that I constantly am getting asked every time I use the knife in the field. How do you make yourself fast with the knife? And of course, there is like the typical way of like swinging it and sliding. You can do that. Watch my speed counter in that upper corner there. You can see that I'm just sliding at the peak of my speed, but there's one extra trick with the knife, because the knife happens to have a speed boosting attack. And that speed boosting attack is not what everyone thinks it is. Charging your heavy 1 attack doesn't boost your speed. See that? If I hold that down, my normal run speed is 6. But if I hold this down, it just goes back to 6, right? However, the heavy 2 attack does boost your speed by 20%. So in order to get to heavy 2, all you gotta do is buffer 1 attack and then start the heavy chain. So this one here, you can see my speed goes up to 7.2. And then I have to let it go and restart it, right? However, you don't. Because if you have a bind, whatever your bind is that equips your melee weapon, so for instance mine is 6 on my mouse, if I just get to this weapon and then I keep tapping that key to equip the melee weapon, it'll let me keep it out for a crazy amount of time, like this. And then when I think it's about to run out, I can go ahead and reset and I can spam it again, and I can go back and forth like that. So, you know, if everything is optimal, I can use my stealth, I can go like this, and I can be moving at 9 meters per second, 50% faster than I would otherwise. Like, I am zooming across the freaking arena. And yeah, that's the power of the knife, is the knife is not only just like one of the best DPS doers in terms of a raw melee weapon, but it's incredibly fast, and using its movement tech, using the ability to slide with it like this and be slippery like that around the map is just so good, so good. And yeah, I just get out there and practice with the knife. Just use the ability to spam and run really fast with it and be a little stealthy boy, and I hope you have fun. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you soon. Mr. Gal, bye bye.